Vreau să declar clar și precis, războiul din Ucraina trebuie să înceteze urgent. Pentru mine este strategia păcii, nu strategia războiului. Mai mult de atât, am văzut ieri cum prin manipulare au fost scoși tineri în stradă. Așa cum i-a scos în stradă, așa îi va scoate și la război. Și nu știu dacă sunt pregătiți părinții să-și trimită copiii la război și să nu se mai întoarcă. Am fost acuzat că vreau să scot România din NATO și Uniunea Europeană. Fals. Nu am spus acest lucru niciodată. Am spus însă că vreau să negociez și vreau să pun interesul național pe primul loc, pentru că nu putem accepta orice. Trebuie negociat totul în avantajul poporului român, indiferent de te afli în orice club. A venit vremea ca destinul și drepturile națiunii române să fie respectate.
This is Carlin Georgescu, as his name is pronounced. Georgescu came out of nowhere to win the first round of the Romanian elections. Second round of the Romanian elections are taking place right now, or at the very least, they were taking place until the court gets involved and in an unprecedented decision annuls the first election, cancels the second, and postpones the election for some later future date. Now, why did they do this? The court took this, the Constitution Court took this unprecedented decision because they said that there was Russian propaganda that was responsible for his meteoric rise into prominence and into winning the election. A coup is in progress in Romania. It is outrageous. They seem to believe in democracy only when they win, but when they lose, it's Russian propaganda, North Korean propaganda, or whatever other kind of propaganda you want to add into the mix. It is a rational act for Georgians to come out with that message. In that message, he pointed out, look, man, I'm not trying to take us out of NATO. I am only concerned with Romanian interests. And Romanian interests, in this case, is to make amends, to stop the war. And they are looking at this like, well, clearly the Russians are getting involved. Do you know why they said the Russians were involved? Because of TikTok videos. They literally use TikTok videos and his presence on TikTok as being the justification to literally annul the election that he was most likely going to win. A candidate that is somewhat of a Eurosceptic, I suppose. It's not in the interest of the ruling class. And because of that, they take this Bigfoot, astonishing step to just scrub the race. I don't want you to look at this as isolated incidents. When you see the Georgian president who decides she doesn't want to leave, she just wants to stay, and she is using Russian propaganda also as her justification to blow off the fact that her term has expired. The prime minister of Georgia has said this is not going to be another Maidan 2.0, full stop. It is not going to happen. And the prime minister has stood strong on that very specific point, even while the president has attacked the government, saying that the previous election was fraudulent because of the Russians. This is Georgescu, I believe, Shalom Georgescu, a French-born, typically understood to be a spook or a spy for the French government. I have no idea why people use dual citizens in countries like this. I don't know why you will put these people in positions of authority, but nevertheless, he or she is. Listen to what she's saying, and I want you to listen very carefully, because the key part of this is from pointing out I have no evidence of anything that I am saying right now.
With use of multiple forms of frauds, that propaganda that was used before the elections was a clear duplicate, the same way as the Russian law that we have, the foreign agents law, duplicated the Russian law. In the same way, the propaganda was direct duplication, copy-paste of Russian clips and videos used at the time of Putin election. So, of course, you cannot prove anything, but the clear links that the ruling party has with Moscow, also demonstrated today by the very many messages of support that they have received, is what we have seen at work in this.
So you feel, because it would have to be feel, since by your own admission you have zero evidence. You're just making it up. Your side lost. It's just that. You lost. Walk away. I feel the exact same way that it did about Donald Trump when Donald Trump lost and wouldn't leave and kept articulating that there was fraud, there was all of this magical fraud. Do you notice that they never tell you what the propaganda is? They never articulate it. They just say there was propaganda. And by saying there was propaganda, you smear your opposition without necessarily delineating what it is that you're saying is propaganda. Just because somebody disagrees with you doesn't mean it's propaganda. Full stop. If I take a position and say, hey, this war was a cluster F, and that Ukraine is not being served by all of your attention to dumping money and weapons into the country, that is not propaganda, that is just true. And unfortunately, Europe somehow has this notion that democracy means that the ruling class always wins. That is astonishing. In this very specific case, this is not isolated. Whether it's in Georgia, where they are literally trying to overthrow the Georgian government, this is what they found at the various NGOs in Georgia when the cops raided the place and arrested many of the people who were involved. 30% of which weren't even Georgian citizens. They were from outside of Georgia. As, again, Europe tries to recreate the events that took place in Ukraine. Molotov cocktails that they were throwing at cops, and they were throwing at buildings, setting buildings on fire. They were violent street protests. And in the violent street protests, you get European leaders saying, no, they were completely peaceful. Just nothing was taking place. Everything was great. If you remember, when Georgia passed their FARA law, the US and Europe flipped out. Now think about that. A law that is designed to check what is coming into the country in regards to the electoral system. Basically, I don't want money coming from France. I don't want money coming from Britain. I don't want money coming from pick your random place and dump into our political space without us knowing where the money is coming from. That is a similar law that the United States has, and yet they were flipping out when Georgia passed that law. Why would they flip out about a law that is delineating money and where that money is coming from in a political sense? Well, I would say that the fact that they're in opposition to it tells you on some level why, and what they're in opposition to. They wanted to be able to use NGOs or for whatever other groups or other means to dump a huge amount of money into the country and use, in similar fashion, techniques and tactics that were used in Ukraine to overthrow the Ukrainian government. They were trying to do the exact same thing in Georgia. They are trying to do it right now. So in Georgia, you have a coup attempt that is literally in progress because they're against the team and the party that won, the Georgia Dream Party that won, that is somewhat skeptical of the war. In South Korea, you get a president that declares dictatorial powers because he couldn't necessarily do everything that he wanted to do. A president that was seen as a U.S. puppet and completely obsequious to U.S. wants. It is thought that maybe the U.S. didn't feel that they had South Korea in their pocket in the way that they wanted South Korea to be in their pocket, especially with the world in flux and the way that the world is, and decided that this guy would be supported and going to be a dictator. Now, South Korea does have dictatorship in their past, and South Korea's military is owned by the US government. But even that was a bridge too far. Those people get involved and those people stop the process of being overthrown and losing their government. These are three governments that are either been couped or in the process of being couped. And all of these governments just so happen to be directly related to either Europe or the United States, and specifically to the war effort. Meaning, he is skeptical of the war. And it just so happens that the US wanted to put in a massive military base in Romania. I don't think that's a coincidence at all. Not to mention, when you look at the map, Romania is on the border of Ukraine. The military base would have given an angle against Russia. Now, if that group, Georgescu, is skeptical of this war and wants to stop this war, and you get the European leaders in the various countries that don't want to stop this war, that wants to keep this war machine going. And keep in mind, even the majority of Ukrainians at this point say they want it to stop. Overwhelming majority, stop the war, even if we have to give up territory to do so. Blinken hears them say, stop the war, and he interprets it as, you need to send your kids. Hey, you need to send your kids. We're going to send you money, but you need to send your teenagers to go out there and face the Russian machine and go and die. That's what you need to do, because we need to keep this war going at all costs, regardless of what it takes. We need to keep going. Go out and die. This is outrageous. They are doing any and everything in their power to retain control of the globe. That includes Syria, by the way, where they're paying jihadis to kill, murder, slaughter the population, with the hopes, with the aim of taking down Assad. They have gone so far on this front that they've called them diversity-friendly jihadists. Think about that. Diversity-friendly jihadists. A cuddly Nazi. A diversity-friendly Nazi. It's outrageous. My producer, by the way, has family stuck in Aleppo, and they're terrified. This guy, Giuliani, who is Al-Qaeda in Syria, effectively an offshoot of ISIS, and they are treating him, even CNN, as if he's a random guy. The guy is on a terrorist watch list. It is clear as day where he is, meaning a drone strike or anything else can hit him. The US military is in Syria. But not so much. And not just not so much. The US has been acting as Al-Qaeda's air force and has been attacking people trying to assist the Syrian military to prevent it from falling to the terrorists. Erdogan has come out, can't contain his glee, and is like, they're going to go to Damascus. What he knows is that this is an operation by the United States, by Israel, and by Turkey. Each one has something that they want out of this deal. What I am pointing out is that all of these events that are taking place over the world that are either overthrowing governments or attempting to overthrow governments are not isolated by any stretch of the imagination. And Europe seems to fully believe that the only way you can be a democracy is if you toe the line on getting people killed or being killed in Ukraine. They don't want Romania to be out of their hands. They don't want Georgia to be out of their hands. And if anything, they want Georgia to be a second front, considering the Ukrainians have effectively been used up. And this is most likely coming to an end either from a collapse on the battlefield or some kind of deal that is made to kill the conflict. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. Carlin has not come out, but he did issue a statement. And in his statement, he says the following. Let's see. There we are. So in his statement, he says this. He called it a barbaric act done by oligarch state against democracy. The corrupt system of Romania has made a pact with the devil. The party leaders tremble with fear. He said, the wave is moving, cannot be stopped. Look everywhere in the whole world. Look at what happened in France. I don't think we lose the election. The Romanian people will go to vote instead of the US President Donald Trump. They had put Georgescu. The same accusations were directed at Trump. I will continue. Nothing can stop us. God can never be defeated, he concluded. And by the way, he's right. I mean, think about it for the moment. In South Korea, they used the specter of North Korea working with the other political party. Okay, this was nonsense. In the US, they said Russia picked Donald Trump up and carried him over the finish line in order for Donald Trump to win that election. They investigated it for years and came back. It was nonsense. I put to you that it is also nonsense in Georgia, who had a war with Russia. The party is just a nationalist. They're only looking out for their own country's interests. It's just that. And yet they smeared him as being working with the Russians. And now they're doing the exact same thing here. I'm saying these aren't isolated. These are cues that they're picking up from each other as ways of trying to maintain power or take power from another government that actually won legitimately. And let's be very clear. It's not shocking that a candidate that says, hey, I don't want your kids to die in a war, or we should negotiate. All of these people are dying for no reason, and it looks like they're trying to pull us into it, well, we also may die. Meaning, the moment that you make that argument to a population saying it is not in our best interests, that argument is correct. Even in the European Union elections, if you remember, there was a trend, a push for parties like the Greens that were pro-war and that was aggravating this thing in Ukraine. Those people lost. Those people lost en masse. Even in this situation in France, the group that ended up winning was skeptical of the war. There's a reason that Schultz right now was like, I'm trying to get a phone call with Putin. I'm trying to get a phone call with Putin because he knows that his time is up. Come around next year. The German government has collapsed. The French government has collapsed. I told you those governments were going to collapse last year. They have collapsed, and they're still trying to cling on to some level of power or some level of influence and control, especially in these countries that have grown skeptical of what Europe has been doing in regards to the war. It's not shocking by any stretch of the imagination that the moment that it is offered a peaceful solution to these conflicts, meaning we need to talk, we need to resolve this, we can't keep going in this kind of war situation. It is not to the best interests of Romania. It is not to the best interests of Europe. It is not even to the best interests of Ukraine. That is a rational point of view. The point of view that Europe and the US has been taking has been nonsensical. They are damaging themselves. If you look at Germany, for example, Germany is being deindustrialized. The government of Germany has utterly collapsed on this notion of funding Ukraine because you're just giving money to a lost cause. Same thing with France. The French government has utterly collapsed. Macron tried to use legislative tricks in order to put his own guy in, despite the fact that the electorate chose somebody else. Macron lost in election after election after election, and it's only now where Barnier got a no confidence vote where the French government has fallen. If you look at Europe and the amount of money that they're spending on oil, gas, energy, etc., up 5 times in comparison to when they were working with the Russians. And all of this for geopolitical expansion, moving NATO to the border of Russia, knocking over the government of Ukraine, putting in these fascist banderites that hate Russians, that went after Russian language, that went after schools, etc. None of this needed to happen. And the damage that Europe is accepting is for something that never needed to happen. These sociopaths are maniacs. And what Georgescu recognized, these sociopaths are maniacs. They're taking us to ruin. And in making that argument to the electorate of Romania, the Romanian public, just like any sane, rational people of conscience, they agreed. Europe can't handle that. The established order can't handle that. And in the same way that Joe Biden was releasing intelligence, quote unquote, in order for political ends, it's true here also. It is unprecedented that they did this. But keep in mind, they did this because they knew they were going to lose. This is a coup, full stop. They want to give the establishment time to come up with some way where they can win the election. Because what they knew is that Georgescu was going to win this election in spades. He presented an argument, a pathway to avoid sending their kids to be shot in the face. And the Romanian population agreed. It's just that. The specter of the Russians or the North Koreans, or add in whatever other boogeyman that you want to add to it. Nonsense. I suspect it is the same thing that happened here in the US around this notion of Trump, that they're just exporting to other countries to use against their people who say, we want what is in the best interest of this country, full stop. It is outrageous that they're doing this. The idea that it's only democracy when they win is farcical. Like, share, and subscribe. Thanks all.